Wilson is among hundreds of farmers across the country named in class action lawsuits against John Deere. They're accusing the company of blocking farmers and everyday mechanics from fixing equipment without going through John Deere dealers.
When you have a machine down in a shop because of a minor issue that you can't have someone work on, it causes a lot of problems.
John Deere spent 150 years becoming the most trusted name in American agriculture. Then it figured out that locking farmers out of their own machines was 3 to 6 times more profitable than selling the machines in the first place. This is how that happened. Now, the 9 highest auction prices ever recorded for older John Deere tractors have all happened in the last 4 years. Not because those machines got better, because farmers decided that a 15-year-old tractor they can fix themselves is worth more than a brand new one they cannot. And it is exactly why American farmers who have run green and yellow equipment their entire lives are quietly handing their next contracts to a company most Americans have never heard of. Before this is over, you'll see exactly what a federal antitrust settlement forced Deere to hand over and why some farmers say it's already too late for John Deere. Custom harvest crews are contractors who own their own combines, tractors, and grain carts, and they follow the harvest north through the growing season, starting in Texas in May, working through Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and the Dakotas by October. A single crew can cover a dozen states in one season, cutting wheat, corn, and soybeans for hundreds of different landowners under tight, weather-dependent contracts. For these operators, a machine sitting idle is losing revenue on a scale most farmers never have to think about, because every day of downtime is a day another crew can undercut them for the next contract. That's exactly the kind of customer Deere's modern service model puts at the most risk. On newer Deere equipment, many repairs require a factory diagnostic tool to clear the fault code before the machine will run again, even after the physical problem has already been fixed. If a part fails in the field and a farmer or an independent mechanic swaps it out themselves, the machine can still refuse to start until an authorized Deere technician connects a laptop and clears the software lock. That gap between fixed and allowed to run again is the weakness Claas is thinking about to take over Deere's customer base. This isn't a new complaint. Farmers and independent repair shops have been raising it for close to a decade, and it's the foundation of 2 separate legal actions that eventually forced Deere's hand. This is a story worth its own section, because what the company was forced to admit in court says more about its priorities than anything in a press release ever will. To understand why Deere built its equipment this way, you have to look at where the company actually wants its future revenue to come from, and it isn't steel. Deere's own Leap Ambition strategy targets 10% of total net sales coming from software and recurring services. By 2030, a target analyst's estimate is worth somewhere between $5 and $6 billion a year once the company's overall growth is factored in. The math behind that bet is brutal in its simplicity. Bernstein analysts estimate the average gross margin on farming software runs around 85%, compared to roughly 25% on equipment sales. Selling a farmer a $500,000 combine is good business. Selling that same farmer a subscription to keep using the features already built into the combine he already paid for is dramatically better business. And unlike a one-time equipment sale, a subscription renews every single year without Deere having to build another machine. The company has spent years building toward this, with a goal of 1.5 million machines and roughly 500 million acres connected to its cloud-based operations center, and a $250 million acquisition of the autonomous vehicle startup Bear Flag Robotics to push older tractors towards software-driven automation. Every connected machine generates data. Every data set makes the platform more valuable. And every farmer locked into that ecosystem is a harder farmer for Claas or Massey Ferguson to win back later. Here's the part that should concern anyone who thinks this is just about convenience. The same lockout that annoys a farmer waiting for a technician is, by design, also the thing that keeps him paying Deere every single year afterward. The FTC's own investigation put a number on exactly how profitable this repair monopoly had become. Federal regulators alleged that Deere's repair business was 3 to 6 times more profitable than its actual machinery sales, built on farmers paying thousands of dollars up front just for the diagnostic access authorized dealers already had for free. John Deere found a second profit center hiding inside the first one, and it took 2 separate legal fights over the better part of 4 years to pry it back open. The Federal Trade Commission, joined by the Attorneys General of Illinois, Minnesota, Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin, filed a formal antitrust lawsuit against Deere in January 2025. alleging the company had unlawfully limited farmers and independent technicians' ability to repair their own Deere equipment, driving up costs and creating exactly the kind of monopoly power the FTC exists to break up. The complaint specifically accused Deere of using monopoly power in the market for fully functional repair tools, arguing that only Deere itself possessed the knowledge needed to build a tool capable of performing every repair on its own machines. 2 months before the federal settlement, Deere agreed to pay $99 million to resolve a separate, consolidated private class action lawsuit brought by farmers over those same repair restrictions. This was a direct financial acknowledgement that customers had been harmed by the exact business model this video is describing. That settlement compensated farmers for damage already done, but it didn't change how the machines worked going forward. That's the piece almost nobody outside the industry noticed, and it's a very different outcome from what came 4 months later.
Under a new settlement, John Deere will provide repair resources, including software to read and reset equipment codes to third-party repair shops for the next 10 years.
On July 8, 2026, Deere settled the federal antitrust case directly, agreeing to provide farmers and independent repair shops with the same repair resources and diagnostic software currently reserved for its authorized dealer network for the next 10 full years, under direct FTC and state oversight. The order also explicitly bars Deere dealers from retaliating against any customer or independent shop that chooses to fix equipment outside the official dealer network. Deere must additionally make available to independent providers any future repair resources it develops for its own dealers during that decade-long window, meaning this is an ongoing legal obligation the company has to keep honoring as its technology evolves. FTC Bureau of Competition Director Daniel Guarnera didn't mince words about what the settlement actually restores. Today's settlement enables farmers to do what they've done for generations, fix their own tractors and other farm equipment, without having to pay an authorized John Deere dealer to do it for them. He said that the outcome was not a new right, but one that had quietly been taken away. Deere, for its part, had argued throughout the case that the lawsuit was baseless, denying its distribution of service tools was anti-competitive at all. 10 years of federal oversight is a meaningful structural change, but it's also, by definition, a reactive one. Whether that legal fix arrives in time to matter is the exact question the used equipment market has already started answering, and the answer isn't flattering. The financial backdrop to all of this makes the strategy look even riskier in hindsight. In 2023, Deere reported earnings of $10.1 billion, a record year by nearly any measure a public company could point to. That's the number the software pivot was supposed to build on. Instead, the following 2 years delivered one of the sharpest downturns in the company's modern history. Deere itself confirmed a 20% decline in sales from 2023 to 2024, and the pain didn't stop there. By the third quarter of 2025, farm and precision agriculture sales were down another 16% year over year to $4.3 billion, while operating profit in that segment had collapsed by 50% compared to the year before. The company itself acknowledged projected earnings for 2025 would land roughly $5 billion below the 2023 peak. The human cost of that decline landed hardest in the towns that build the machines.
Deere has confirmed a total of 238 people will be laid off.
Since the start of 2024, Deere has cut more than 2,600 jobs across its Iowa manufacturing footprint alone, including over 1,700 positions concentrated in Waterloo, plus a temporary shutdown of the entire Ottumwa Works plant in December 2024, as customer orders dried up. By August 2025, another 238 workers were let go across 3 separate Midwest plants. And layoffs continued rolling through salaried positions well into 2025, alongside the production cuts. Deere's public explanation leans heavily on the broader agricultural economy, such as falling crop prices, high interest rates, tariff pressure. But the USDA data shows major row crop cash receipts falling 16% in 2024 alone, following an 8% drop the year before. And that's real, and it's not something Deere controls. But a downturn doesn't explain why the company's most loyal, highest spending repeat customers are the exact group now telling anyone who'll listen that they're done buying green. That's the difference between a bad year and a broken relationship. And nowhere is that difference showing up more clearly than in the one corner of the industry that can least afford downtime: custom harvest. Custom crews choose equipment based on uptime, because uptime is the entire business model. A combine that isn't cutting isn't earning, and a crew that misses a contracted window doesn't get invited back next season. That single fact has made this specific customer segment one of the most sensitive early indicators of a manufacturer losing trust, well before it shows up in Deere's broader sales figures. Claas has increasingly become the answer crews are giving when asked what they're switching to. This user on Reddit forecasted this: "I'm happy for the farmers, but the downside is that this doesn't make John Deere suffer as it should and never try and do this again." Which is what happened recently to BMW when they tried the heated seats as a subscription model and ended up with governments proposing legislation against them. None of this means Deere machines are mechanically worse. Deere's own X911H Endrid still leads the market in raw horsepower and grain tank capacity, and the company maintains the largest dealer network and parts availability of any combine manufacturer in North America. This is a real advantage during a normal season, when downtime gets resolved through official channels without much friction. The problem custom crews describe isn't the machine's engineering. It's what happens the moment something goes wrong 3 counties from that dealer network. For a row crop farmer who cuts 1 field a year on his own land, that friction is an occasional headache. But for a crew moving between 5 states in a single harvest season, unable to predict exactly where a breakdown will happen or how far the nearest authorized technician will be, it's a structural risk built into every single contract they sign. Claas didn't have to out-engineer Deere to win this segment. It just had to be the option that didn't require permission to keep running. If you want to see how seriously the market is taking all of this, don't look at what's selling at Deere dealerships, look at what's selling at farm retirement auctions, because that's where farmers come with real money, and the pattern has become impossible to ignore. In July 2025, a 15-plus-year-old pre-DEF John Deere 7730 tractor with over 16,000 hours on it sold for $150,250 at a Big Iron online auction, making it the 4th highest auction price ever recorded for that specific make, year, and model, despite the machine's age. Machinery Pete noted that the 9 highest auction prices ever recorded for pre-DEF machines have all happened within the last 4 years alone. That's right, there is something to be taken seriously. The market is actively repricing older, simpler equipment upward in real time because buyers have decided it's worth more to them than the newer alternative sitting on a dealer lot. The pattern shows up again and again across different equipment classes. In April 2026, a 30-year-old John Deere 6500 3-wheel sprayer sold for a record $65,000, topping the previous record by $15,000, while used prices for the John Deere 8R340, one of the company's flagship modern tractors, climbed 12.5% over the same stretch. And here's the part that should worry Deere most. This isn't a temporary blip driven by one bad harvest season. Machinery Pete's own data shows the sweet spot buyers are chasing has held steady at 8 to 12 years old for years running, meaning farmers aren't just avoiding this year's new equipment, they're building a long-term habit of skipping the newest generation of Deere machines entirely. That logic is showing up at the high end of the market too. A 2004 John Deere 8120 with under 900 hours sold for a record $158,000 in early 2026, nearly $10,000 above the previous record for that model, precisely because well-maintained machines from before the heaviest software integration are becoming harder to find and more expensive to replace. A machine doesn't get more valuable every year because buyers have decided the alternative isn't worth the trade-off. None of this happened to a company without a reputation to protect. Deere become the default choice for American agriculture for over more than 150 years by being better than the rest. Starting with a single self-scouring steel plow that solved a problem competitors couldn't crack, and expanding into the company farmers trusted precisely because its equipment held up under conditions other brands couldn't survive. That reputation is exactly what made Deere's dominance so durable for generations, and exactly why walking away from a Deere machine has historically felt, to a lot of American farmers, like walking away from a family tradition rather than just switching suppliers. That's also what makes this story different from an ordinary sales slump. Brand loyalty in agriculture isn't casual. Farms get passed down, and the equipment preference often gets passed down right along with it. Breaking that kind of inherited trust doesn't happen because of one bad quarter or one frustrating repair. It happens when a customer's lived experience stops matching the reputation the brand was built on. There is another shift happening underneath the Claas story that the sales numbers have not fully caught up to yet. The farmers inheriting land and equipment decisions today are not the same farmers who built 40-year relationships with a John Deere dealer and stuck with green out of habit and loyalty. New generation enters agriculture with a completely different set of priorities, and those priorities are cutting directly against everything Deere's current business model was built around. Where an older farmer might accept a frustrating repair experience because switching brands feels disloyal to a family tradition, a younger farmer runs the same calculation a startup founder would. What is the total cost of ownership? What is the downtime risk? What does the data say? And crucially, which manufacturer treats me like a customer instead of a revenue stream? The answer that keeps coming back is rarely John Deere, but it is not always Claas either. C&H Industrial, the parent company behind Case IH and New Holland, has been quietly aggressive in marketing right-to-repair accessibility as a direct selling point to younger operators who watched the Deere lawsuits play out and drew their own conclusions. Case IH in particular has positioned its AFS Connect platform as a system farmers own and control, not one they rent access to. AGCO, which owns Massey Ferguson and Fendt, is picking up serious ground at the top end of the market. Fendt in particular has developed a cult following among high-output operations that want European engineering precision without the software dependency complaints that follow Deere equipment. Among younger, tech-oriented farmers who grew up researching equipment online rather than taking a dealer's word for it, Fendt's reputation has been climbing steadily. And then there are the trucks. New generation farm operators are speccing out their work trucks with the same efficiency mindset they apply to combines and planters. Ford's Super Duty and Ram's Heavy Duty lineup have been making ground on Chevy's traditional farm country dominance, partly on towing and payload numbers, but increasingly on technology integration. In-cab displays, fleet management software, and connectivity features that sync with farm management platforms matter to a 25-year-old running an operation the same way an app matters to anyone else running a business. The bottom line is simple. The next generation is not sentimental about a brand. They are loyal to whatever works, whatever they can fix, and whatever does not charge them a subscription to use what they already paid for. So where does this actually leave Deere? The company remains, by almost any measure, the dominant force in American agricultural equipment. The FTC settlement didn't break up the company, and Deere's dealer network, parts availability, and raw engineering still lead the industry in most categories that matter on paper. The 10-year repair settlement is a real structural change, and it removes the single biggest point of friction that pushed custom crews toward Claas and Massey Ferguson in the first place. But structural change and restored trust aren't the same thing, and they don't move at the same speed. A crew that switched brands 2 seasons ago, retrained its mechanics on different equipment, and built new relationships with a different dealer network doesn't necessarily switch back the moment a settlement clears, especially when the used market has already made holding on to an older, simpler Deere machine a financially smart decision in its own right. The real question isn't whether Deere fixes the software problem because the settlement already forces that. It's whether that change is enough to undo years of custom crews telling each other exactly why they don't trust the color green the way their fathers did. If you've worked a custom harvest crew or run Deere equipment against Claas or Massey Ferguson in the field, tell us in the comments which one actually held up when it mattered. That's the kind of first-hand account this story needs more of. New breakdowns on which manufacturers are winning their customers back and which ones are quietly losing them for good drop every week. Subscribe if you want the next one before it shows up in the sales numbers.